Gavin Sams, Jason Allen, Representative Alicia Stovall. There we go. Okay, there we go. Praise the Lord. All right. Yeah, I understand. I stand up on my own show. I can't do that. And I think, there we go. All right, cool. So everybody who's here. So let's do this here because I can't pull the email right now. We're going to start here. Just give your title and what you do so folks know that there's a reason you're sitting up here.
Hello, my name is Aretta Balden, and first and foremost, I'm a parent. I'm also a parent advocate, an engaged community member, and the president of my school's PTO.
Good evening. Also, welcome to Morehouse College. I will start by saying I'm a 2000 graduate of Morehouse College, also an English major, like Quentin. I currently sit on the Prince George's County Board of Education in Prince George's County, Maryland. But in my day job, I'm a deputy director of the Reinventing America Schools project at the Progressive Policy Institute.
My name is Danielle LaSure. I am the founder of Ed Connect, a nonprofit here in Metro Atlanta that helps to educate parents about their school choice options.
Again, Dr. Gavin Sams. I am the founder and head of schools of Genesis Innovation Academy, a boys and a girls academy charter school here in Southeast Atlanta. 30 years in education and higher ed, K through 12, so glad to be here.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jason Allen. I'm the board chair for the state of Georgia's first charter commission school for all girls.
Good evening, everyone. I'm State Representative Valencia Stovall, House District 74, and currently serve in the Georgia General Assembly on the Education Committee.
All right, then. A round of applause, please. So I'm going to start this way. Anybody on the panel who used to be absolutely against any idea of school choice? Okay, so I want to start with you. And so what was it? Was it stuff that you were told, stuff that you heard about, horror stories? I want to start there.
It was actually the stories that I heard. It was back in 2000. At that time, Drew Charter School was just beginning to open in the city of Atlanta. And I was PTA president at my children's elementary school. And when they talked about charters, it really wasn't explained. And so, of course, the words were they're going to remove the students from our schools, the traditional schools, and the money's going to go away from the school. They're not going to get the quality education that they should receive. So those were some of the things that were told to a lot of us as parents.
And then when you started investigating and finding out the truth, then what did you then begin to think and say?
So after I started investigating what the truth was, I actually ended up becoming a governance board chair of a state charter school that was actually in a lot of trouble, actually getting ready to be closed down. So I got a chance to really dive in and see exactly what the background was about this particular charter school down in Clayton County, which was the area where I lived. At that time, I was not elected, so I was a regular citizen. And I really were able to see the different laws that had been passed and how advantageous it was for those parents who wanted a different opportunity for their children that they were not getting in our traditional school setting.
The reason I want to start there because one of my favorite lines is from the movie Hoodlum, when Lawrence Fishburne said, "When you don't know, you don't know." And as I travel this country, I have heard every single horror story known to man and woman. Oh my God, it's going to just destroy public education. The whole system is going to come tumbling down. And it reminds me that was the case when Michelle Reed took over in Washington, D.C. School District. George Parker was the head of the Teachers Union, and George, of course, who now is an art and school choice supporter. George said, look, we all said the same thing. And you look at D.C. now, you pretty much have a district that's half charter, half traditional. The school district still exists. It didn't crumble. It didn't fall apart. Folks didn't jump out of windows and lose their mind. But what this does is it causes people to say there is more than one delivery system for education. And in many ways, that's what we had. It's pretty much like, this is just it. And so anybody else can jump in here, and that is, how have you also had to educate our people to say, don't just believe what one person told you, actually go and get a better understanding of what these choices are, what these options are, not just, oh, I heard this, I heard that. Anybody can jump in. Yeah, go ahead. Okay, here's the deal. Y'all ain't got to raise your hand. We ain't in class.
Okay. Well,
okay?
You
don't have to wait for me to call your name. Okay? If people start talking over each other, then I'll step in. But anybody can jump in. Go.
Well, I say it's important we do our homework, we do our history. I think I've heard you speak on many occasions about understanding the history of education in our community, even coming out of slavery. And in many cases, we were building schools even before emancipation. When people were coming down from the north trying to educate us, they were going into very rural parts of the country and found schools already there.
So I want to put a pin in it. Write this down. A book you need to get, which I know you're referencing, The Education of Blacks in the South, 1860 to 1935, by James D. Anderson. University of Illinois, brother spent 10 years researching this book, and he broke all of these things down. It's an amazing book. Matter of fact, he really needs to send me a check, because I've mentioned that book in speeches all across the country. Yeah. I mean, trust me, he's like, wow, all of a sudden they're buying the book. But it's an absolutely critically important book to understand how black people were responsible, freed slaves, for creating public education. Go.
So I think it's important we do it home. I'll make one more point, and I'll let other people speak. I found out about 6 months ago that my family in Southern Virginia helped open what many of you who have been studying education very long ago called the Rosenwald School. Julius Rosenwald was a philanthropist out of Chicago who connected with Booker T. Washington. And Booker T. Washington said, you know, I have this Tuskegee Institute, but because of the idea that during slavery, education was the one thing you could not do to your slave, we have people trying to come into our schools and are not prepared. But if we can have schools throughout the South that prepare our students to walk into Tuskegee, we will be able to meet our mission. So over the course of 20 or 30 years, they opened up 5,000 schools. Roosevelt gets a lot of credit for that. But if you look at the data, and I'd researched my family's school, only about a third of the money for the school was given to them by Julius Rosenwald. 2/3 of the money were raised by African Americans, many of whom didn't have anything. They built the school. The model for the school were created by architects from Tuskegee University. And so we have a history of school founders, and I'm glad the brothers are here, and I think Donald Hintz and those who's a Morehouse alum have been talked about. And so when we control our own narrative and we give ourselves agency, and we are in the driver's seat, I think a lot of the conversations we have about this trust in public education and this trust in curriculum goes out the window to your initial point. And so my point is, when people ask me about why I feel the way I feel about this, is because I've done my homework and I've done the research, and because these stories are connected to my grandfather learned how to read in a Julius Rosenwald school, and that school was built with $1,000 from the so-called Negroes of Bracy, Virginia in 1919. This is the 100th year of that school. And so we have to continue to tell our own story. When we do that, we'll become empowered to be much more engaged in this conversation.
There you go. There you go. Also, so here's the deal. All throughout, I'm going to be throwing out different stuff, so you need to be taking notes. The late Julian Bond was very much the last thing that he was involved in before he died was the promotion of the documentary on Rosenwald in those schools, because he attended one of those schools. And so you should be able to seek that documentary out as well. So it's a great documentary. All right, anybody else? Go ahead.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we need to remind ourselves is innovation may be the issue here. So competition and choice and all those things typically in any industry spur innovation. So for the longest time, I would ask people, what was the last innovation you saw in education for the last 50, 60, 100 years? Nothing has really changed. So when people said, well, why would you do this? I'm saying, well, because what we're doing isn't working. And if it's not working, let's try something. This was never about competing to, as was said, to beat down traditional public schools. It was to create a space where you could try things that traditional public systems simply aren't allowed to do. It's not because of the superintendents and the principals and the teachers. There's an overarching structure, usually at the state level, that doesn't allow a lot of innovation. It's just as we go. So the great thing about a charter in controlling our own destiny, so to speak, is we get to try something to do things that districts cannot do. So this is my second time around doing single gender. It's not everybody's cup of tea.
Mm-hmm.
But however, when you have situations where we look at our community and we say, hey, our young men are really struggling, really, really struggling. Of every demographic group, they're at the bottom. Maybe one option is to figure out what they actually need, what will actually work for them, separate and apart from everybody else, because they may have unique and special needs in our community. We get to do that. Traditional public schools struggle with that. But every school, Ivy Prep did the same thing, but other schools try something unique and innovative. Interestingly enough, the city of Houston, the district of Houston, their superintendent won Superintendent of the Year because he infused practices that were learned in charter schools and he put them in Houston public schools. Dr. Kostarfin has used several things that have been learned in charter schools, and she is now using them to try to change the dynamic in Atlanta public schools. So it's about figuring new things out and learning and trying something new because the old stuff isn't working.
And let me also say this when we talk about this idea we have this idea of black innovation education. Those of you who are older, how many of you remember the CBS movie of the week starring Cicely Tyson on Marva Collins? Okay. If you were black, you all crowded around the television when that movie came on. I got the DVD right now. And when we talk about education, folks talk, oh my God, Marva Collins, Marva Collins, Marva Collins. Well, Marva Collins was frustrated with the Chicago public school system. And Marva Collins went out and created her own school. At that time, you really didn't have the expansion you have right now of charter schools. So it was a private school. One of the issues that they had is that as they kept going, many of those parents on the west side of Chicago and south side, they couldn't afford to send their kids. And then when she eventually retired, her daughter took that school over. And again, they had dwindling population. And then when they closed their doors, it was pretty sad because shortly thereafter, her daughter committed suicide. And I remember when my wife and I took over raising 6 of my nieces, and 2 of them were 3 grade levels behind. I said, I need to find somebody who can help me understand how to get them caught up. And I tracked down Marva Collins. In fact, she was living at the time I think it was in Augusta. And we had a great conversation. And this was a sister who, through her Socratic teaching method, said, I could take any child who could not read at the beginning of the year and have them reading Shakespeare by the second semester. Her frustration was the existing system. And so here we have an opportunity that if you have modern day Marva Collins, and if you have a system that allows for them to be able to do that innovation, why would we say, oh no, don't do it? Because black parents are tired of sitting around waiting for the next 5-year plan for the next superintendent, then the next superintendent, then the next school board, then the next mayor. You can jump in.
So I entered the public school system when my child was entering into high school. And I seriously considered committing a felony to enroll her in a school that was going to challenge her academically.
Now explain that when you say, because there are different felonies.
So
you better whip somebody's ass.
I mean,
or were you gonna give a fake address? I mean, you want to break that down.
So I had an address.
Y'all were like, damn, she gangster.
So
y'all were thinking, I know. Go ahead.
I had an address in a school system that I thought could service my child the way that she needed to be serviced. I could not afford, nor did I want to pay private school tuition, which is basically college tuition at the high school level. And I use the address my kid placed into the magnet program, but I shouldn't have to take my child across town. I shouldn't have to lie about where I live. I shouldn't have to make these types of choices and deal with the consequences simply for a quality education. And knowing what my kid needed, we did end up in a charter school based on her needs. And that school it's not perfect. It requires parental involvement. It requires being present, asking your child every day, how was your day? What did you learn? Yes, even at 16, you need to do that because these are adults in training. So I'm thankful that I had a choice, that I could go to school within my zip code and make a difference in my community by making that choice.
How many of you have heard, go ahead. How many of you have heard of Harriet Ball? 1, 2, 3, 4. Gotcha. How many of you have heard of KIP? There is no KIP without Harriet Ball. When one of the founders of KIP was in the classroom, public school, he all of a sudden heard all these noises coming across the hall. And all these kids were just making just noise, and he was like, what in the world is going on? So he walks across the hallway, and what he discovers is this black woman who is using these unorthodox teaching methods, who is using rap lyrics, who is using music, who is using dance to teach kids how to learn. It was in that moment that he was inspired to say, we got to start our own school. Her teaching methods are still, she passed away in 2011, age of 64 of a heart attack. KIP's educational model today is all based upon the teaching methods of Harriet Ball. I'm saying that again because they saw this innovative black woman teaching, and now you have a charter network with nearly 200 schools that was based upon that sister. Imagine, again, if you had a black CMO with 200 schools taking advantage of the very innovation. That's why, for me, this idea of school choice as a black choice is critically important. Go ahead. And go ahead. Anybody?
Yeah, I was going to say the key is in the legislation and the policy that opens up the door for charter schools like KIP and some of the others to operate, even with Dr. Sams to be able to do it. And as a state legislator, we in the past have allowed more openness for our traditional schools to be able to try some of the things that charter schools are being able to do. So it's no excuse when it comes down not being able to do it. And being able to take those models that the charter schools have actually kind of innovated and tried out to make sure that they are actually working. What I have not seen on a wide scale across the state are our traditional schools taking those methods and models that the charter schools are actually using to make sure that the kids are getting the best education, especially in our black communities.
Jason and Danielle, I want to bring you in this conversation because at the end of the day, the question is what works? I mean, if it's working and kids are learning, why are we not saying study it, replicate it?
Part of the issue, I think, as someone who has been on a school board before, I think it's really important that we have people in our community, business-minded, lawyers, people to back up our strong leaders in education, because there's a difference between managing a business, doing the books and accounting, and excellent teaching. We need to make sure that more of us from the community join these boards and use our gifts so that we can continue to uplift education. And that's part of the reason why we don't have as many CMOs, I think, here in Georgia, because we need to collectively as a community make sure that those with the backgrounds of, business, accounting, law, like we can be there for you in stronger ways.
Well, and one of the reasons, again, the way we started this is because this is not just about, okay, come to a city, have a conversation, and then, okay, that was great, then leave. No, it's what we want to come out of this is what we did in Tulsa. Jason, I'm going to bring you in after this here. What we did in Tulsa was there was a pastor there who wanted Michelle Rhee and Kevin Johnson, wanted a bunch of us to come in to talk about school choice. And we said, okay, Kevin Johnson, who was the former mayor of Sacramento, he said, look, you have to bring together at least 250 people before we come in. He said, we're not going to bring people in and then it's 30 people in the audience. Pastor said, no problem. So he put it together, brought the people in, and it was jam-packed. Ended up, the mayor's wife comes there. The superintendent who opposed charters, he had to show up because he said, look, it's about 500 black people meeting about education. I better show the hell up because my job might be in jeopardy. And I gave one of the keynotes, and what they did was, out of that gathering, the people, let me say it again, they created a steering committee. And they created people to say, okay, and they had all these stakeholders. They had Links, Deltas, Alphas, they had grassroots folks, they had Hotep, they had Boule, they had everybody. They said, if you care about this issue, we want you at the table. And what they then did was, to your point, they said, okay, who's interested in creating charter schools? Folks raised their hand. They then said, okay, who has capacity? Who has land? Who has building space? Who has resources? And they began to do that. As opposed to sort of this Wild Wild West thing where folks jump out there, start a school, and yes, you don't have strong curriculum, you don't have strong finances, you don't have a strong board, you have a very weak foundation. I dare say, if you see a failing charter school, I will show you a failing charter school that was failing before they even opened their doors because their systems were weak. And so what this is about is inspiring folks here to say, okay, if you then create that same, let's say, steering committee, we want to be able to connect you to high-performing operators and who will serve as mentors. And that is, if you want to talk about creating a school just for black boys, visiting with Tim King and say, how did you do it? How did you start? Visiting with Steve Perry, visiting with Gestalt, because the mentorship and the partnership is critically important. Jason.
To go back to Atlanta, being from Atlanta, and most people, I see Shauna,
Can y'all hear him?
Out to me.
All right, is the
sorry,
microphone
can you
on?
guys hear me now?
Yeah, there you go.
So being from Atlanta, it's a very interesting dynamic. So I saw Shauna, it made me think of this. I'm a Frederick Douglass Astro, so most people so Astros are here. Most people who are from Atlanta and you went to school here, we are very passionate about our schools. Our high schools, in a sense, are like HBCUs. And so when you have the conversations going back to 2000 about, hey, we're closing schools, we're going to open up a charter school, that's like a civil war here in Atlanta because our schools were very serious about that. We did not do a good job in Atlanta of educating people about school choice. We dropped the ball with that. And it created a division with people who were like, hey, we really do need to do something innovative in classrooms, but the public traditional system is just not working.
Hold on, I want to stop you right there. I want to go back to what you said about how we treat these high schools like HBCUs. I went to one of those schools, Jack Yates High School in Houston, one of the most historic high schools in Houston. While the folks were saying that, were any of the people looking at the grades and the proficiency of the students? Go ahead.
Okay. So I couldn't answer that. I was in school during that time. But
no. But what were you hearing? Because so were they looking at that? Because this is what my experience is. We are in love with buildings and history without saying, are the kids learning? And that, for me, is a problem. And this is not just a black thing with schools. I ran the Chicago Defender. Same thing. Folks are like, man, y'all can't leave the building. The building was decrepit. It would have cost us $8 million to refurbish the building, and the entire company wasn't worth $8 million. They were in love with the building and its history, and I said, y'all got to pick the building or the paper. Which one y'all want? Because we stay in this building, there will be no paper. And I think this is sort of the same thing we think about a lot of our schools. We are in love with the building because of the history, but if the kids in the building, not when we went there, are not being educated, damn the building, it's about the kids. Jason, go ahead.
So to go back to that point, we spent a lot of time in town hall meetings, and I know there are other advocates that are here. We spent hours discussing that same thing. Oh, they're going to close my school. What are we going to do? How do we preserve the legacy? But we are missing the conversation about how are we serving kids. I've learned from advocates, Shauna, I saw Mary Palmer here, Ed Johnson. We have made advocacy a bad word. And I talk to Stephen Quinn and other advocates about this all the time. We silence parents. We make them feel as if, hey, my child isn't learning in this environment. What can I do? Mm-hmm. We make them feel as if, hey, something is wrong. You shouldn't do this. Or, oh, you're being disgruntled. Or, oh, you're not trying to work with us. And so now you have parents who feel like, well, I don't want to say anything. I don't want my child to be labeled or attacked. And then on the flip side of that, those persons who do speak up and say something, they become immediately the bad guy.
Or we do this here. Y'all, we can't do that because she worked 2 jobs. She can't come to the meetings. It's so hard for her. And I'm going, why don't you ask her? That's what when I hear people talk about that, I'm going, you ever talk to her? And that drives me crazy when they do that. Go ahead and jump in.
So one of the things I didn't mention in my intro in terms of parent advocacy is I work with a group called Atlanta Thrive. And
so you just forgot that. That's why you on the damn panel, but you just didn't want to mention that.
But our mission is to disrupt inequities in education, and the way that we do that is by engaging, informing, and empowering parents so they can be powerful. So to make the powerless, or someone who seems or feels powerless, powerful, but arming them with the data and the resources and the confidence to be able to walk in their school and advocate not just for their child, but for all the children in the school and all the children in the district.
In fact, Howard Fuller, he founded BAEL, Black Alliance Education Options. He doesn't call this school choice. He calls it parental choice for that very reason. Go ahead.
Roland, I think the conversation around parent voice is still an income conversation. Because we think that low-income parents don't know what to do with their children, but those of us who got a little bread, I know what's best for my child, right?
Oh, and that happens. Yep.
And so when parents are saying, I want a certain education for my child, and we say, well, you don't know what's best for you.
Sustained.
So why am I different from you who chose a private school or chose to move 50 miles down the road and put my child in a school with kids that don't look like mine? And so my organization, we actually do those stakeholder convenings around the country, and we went to, our last stop was in Memphis, and we worked with Sarah Carpenter and Memphis Lift. And we brought together the people who've been doing it all along, which is the black women, right? And so we talk about the civil rights movement in Atlanta, which was run by black women. And so we said, let's just give everybody the same rights and responsibilities that a lot of us so-called upper middle class black folks said we deserve and we earn, right? And so let's just do that. I think it's important that we do put people's names to these. It's easy to vilify a certain movement or if you don't put the names to it. And I'm going to give you all a name. Hazim Hardiman. Hazim Hardiman just came popular recently because he's a 2019 Rhodes Scholar from Temple University. Why is that name important? Because his mom had to lie about her address in Philadelphia in order to get him a quality education. And now he's a 2019 Rhodes Scholar, right? And so when we put names to these people, and I just say, 80% of black boys and 50% of black girls and these numbers and poverty numbers and free and reduced, it's easy to sort of dismiss that. But I challenge you to stand in front of a black mother, a black father, a family whose child has been undereducated and underserved for 2 and 3 and 4 years and tell them to wait.
Boom.
Just do that.
Boom.
Because I know with myself and my wife, I can pick up tomorrow and I can make that change. I have that agency. But we have to share that and say, you know what? Your child is just as important as mine is. And we don't do that, and we had to do that better.
Roland, I wanted to...
Sustained. Go ahead.
All right. Actually, I introduced...
Hold on. Go.
Actually, I introduced House Bill 263 for that very reason about parents not having the opportunity to wait. This House bill allows parents to openly enroll in any school in the state of Georgia without restrictions with zip code, as long as the person who lives in that residential address gives them permission to use that address. And so when you talk about looking at in parents' faces and mothers' faces that don't know what other choices they have, and they're willing to make those sacrifices, whether it's driving an extra 30 minutes an hour, they shouldn't have to. But in the meantime, those kids are going to be turning 18. And once they turn 18, the local school districts, they're no longer concerned about our kids. It now becomes a societal problem. And we start looking at what's going on with our prison system. I know in Georgia, we're spending about $1.6 billion in corrections. So what if we were able to take that amount of money and recycle it back into education or into workforce, whatever that's needed,
That's right.
if that's not what's happening?
And we have to understand that black people literally are going to jail for their children. When you talk about committing that felony, how many of you have heard Kelly Bolar Williams? Kelly Bolar Williams was a sister in Ohio who was so despondent with the education at her child's school that she used the address of her parents. She was imprisoned. The state of Ohio went after her. It was so bad that they eventually also put her dad in jail. Her dad died in jail. Kelly, she texts me all the time, when you listen to, she's also written a book, and it's Kelly, K-E-L-L-Y, Bolar, B-O-L-A-R, Williams. And she has often talked about that experience of going on trial, all because she said, I can't send my kid to this bad school because I'm trying to give them a life. And they literally said, you don't live in this zip code. You can't send your kid here. Reverend James Meeks, Chicago, Salem Baptist Church. What he did, he's led protests to the suburbs out near Chicago where he knew they couldn't do it, but they brought 200 and 300 parents and kids and tried to enroll them in these suburban white schools on the first day of school to highlight the inequities. And so we are dealing with right now black parents who are willing to go to jail or chance going to jail using addresses of other people to enroll their kids in better schools. That's why this is valuable and important. Go ahead.
So Representative Stovall made an amazing point in regards to policy, and I also want to drive that we need people present. Advocacy begins, as a lot of us on the stage know, with us being present. We can't advocate for our children if we're not in the schools. If we don't know what's happening. I've seen too many times we trust people who are leading schools to also educate, rear, take care of, lead our children, and we don't know what's happening in classrooms. We don't know what's happening when they're going to the recess or when they're going to the cafeteria. So we need to be present. There are a couple of things that are happening under the Gold Dome right now that we need more people in the city of Atlanta and Metro Atlanta helping to advocate. Specifically, when you look at school choice, the National Charter School Association has just released a report that has showed that our schools have increased specifically around the area of special education. But it's also important for us to realize that where charter schools may be thriving...
So hold the microphone closer to your mouth. Hold the microphone closer.
Sorry, thank you. We also have to realize that there are a lot of kids who are being left behind because there are schools that are failing children in special education. That starts with policy. It also connects to the school-to-prison pipeline. So when we're advocating for school choice, we also have to be advocating for other avenues that do not circumvent our children from not being successful.
I'm looking at our YouTube live stream, and there was someone, and I'm going to find his name. Y'all know I don't play that. So H.A. White 2000 said, how about you fully fund the schools that we have? Okay. Right, I have no disagreement. But check this out. We had a similar event like this in Selma. On the panel, we had a member of the State Board of Education, who was an art and charter opponent. We had the Alabama Education Association, who was on the panel. And then we had a sister who was the first black female athletic director of a Division I school. This is what she said. She said, because of the education rates in Selma, I will not send my scouts to even scout your athletes because the likelihood they cannot make the grade. She said, we are seeing black students losing scholarships because they can't meet the NCAA academic requirements. So then the brother who was from the Alabama Education Association, who happened to be a fraternity brother of mine, Alpha, and he was he was like just mad the whole time. He said, fully funding. I said, okay. I said, have you ever been fully funded? He said, yes. I said, really? When? So he told me the year. I said, what were the proficiency rates of the students when you were fully funded? He says, higher than they are now. I said, that's not an answer. I want to know what was the number. And we went back and forth, back and forth. And there was a sister in the audience who said, I got it. She pulled up her head up on her phone, and I walked up, I said, what were the numbers? She said, for black students, the proficiency rate, the years they were fully funded, was 4.63%. How you just responded was how the room responded. I turned to him, I said, so the years you were fully funded, 95% of black children failed. Why am I saying that? Because we think, because we've been told, that the answer is to fully fund. But here's what we don't know, and you run a school, please jump in here. If you understand education, the allocation per student is not going solely to the student. The amount of money that is set aside per pupil is broken down. It's going to all kind of other things. And so literally the amount of money, if you break it down, that's being used to educate that kid is not even close to the per pupil deal. And so I just want us not to get caught up in, I believe in fully funding, but I want us to understand that that is not, oh, you're fully funded, boom, taken care of.
Let me just some misconceptions. So I mentioned earlier, I'm on the Board of Education in Prince George's County. We're the 17th largest school system in America. Our budget is $2.8 billion with a B. 130,000 students, 210 schools. Here's a misconception that people say when a charter schools take money out of public schools, right? That's the narrative. Charter schools are public schools.
Hold up, repeat that. Repeat that.
Charter schools are public schools because as a school board member, if this charter school is not performing in the way that we expect them to, and they said they were going to when we authorized them, then we can close their door.
No. I want you to slow that down. I want you to go back. I want you to go back. Charter schools are
public schools.
So, if a student is going to a charter public school, they are still a public school student.
School student.
Okay, go ahead.
So when that parent.
Now hold up. I'm gonna get to that.
We can talk accountability.
Trust me.
We can talk accountability, and in some places, charter schools have more accountability than district schools.
Now hold on. You already repeated something. Hold on.
I'm an official with a school system.
Hold on.
This is what I deal with every day.
Hold on. You just stood up and said oversight. Did you not just say if a charter school is not performing, you as the school district can shut it down?
Shut it down.
That's called oversight. Go ahead.
So the idea.
I'm not done. Hold up. I'm going to get to you. Trust me. Go ahead. Hold up. 1 second. He is describing the system in Prince George's County, Maryland. Go ahead.
And our system is not unlike other systems. At the same time, when someone comes in and says charter schools take money, in many instances, we have parents in my district who have opted out of the public school and have put their children in private school. So say they're in so-and-so private school. Let me just for a second. My district does not get the per pupil funding for that child who is sitting across the street in that private school. That's about $15,000 that my district has to account for.
Hold. I want you to run past that. The per pupil for PG is $15K?
15,000.
Okay, go ahead.
So when that child says, we're no longer going to Prince George's County Public Schools, when we go to the state, they say your enrollment is down. So we're going to give you less money. But if a parent says, because of this school, because of what you do differently, because of what I'm seeing happening, we want to bring your child back into the school system, that $15,000 comes back. Now, our system will give not a whole $15,000 to his school. We may give 70% to his school. So maybe he's getting more like 12. In some cases in Georgia, you could say you're actually getting less to educate the child at your charter school than at a district school, all while the parents paying the same amount in taxes.
Now, hold up. I want to unpack that. Because again, if you don't know the rules, most charter schools, based upon state laws, Representative, are not allowed to use any of the funds for buildings or construction.
Or transportation.
So, one second. So, you have a charter school that in many cases is getting less per pupil, and that charter school cannot use any of that money to the facilities, transportation that a public school can. So when a traditional district builds a new school and drops $80 million on a new building, they can use district money for building, for buses, for transportation, but the charter can't. Go ahead. 1 second. No. Brother, hold on 1 second.
Point is this.
Hold on 1 second, brother. I'm walking you through stuff because here's the piece. You might know, but they might not know. The point of this is to fully walk them through. He already said, if you shut a school down, what happened with the kid? That's the next question. And so I'm walking it through because the point of this is for folks who don't know, because there are a number of misconceptions. So if you shut a school down, charter school down, what happens to students?
Last point.
Go ahead.
So the 30% of the money we withheld from his charter, we keep, and we're keeping that 30% of 30% of the money we didn't have yesterday because that child was in a private school to begin with. Does that make sense? Like, because they came in, we're getting resources that we didn't have before as a district, all while only giving 70 cents on a dollar to him to educate him. So this point around where they go after that. In many districts, if a charter school, for example in Washington, D.C., is not doing well, they will go through a process of giving them a year or two with an action plan of saying, hey, you said you were going to do this in the amount of time with the resources we gave you, which is, again, a fraction of what we do when students are in our district schools. And so we're going to give you a year. We're going to sit down with you. We're going to go through this process. If after 2 years we're not doing well, and we give you a kind of a 6-month notice that this thing is not going to work out, we may work with schools that are already doing well. And so districts know which charter schools, which community partners are doing well. And so they will identify that partner. It may be KIPP, it may be Friendship. Friendship Charter Schools is getting phone calls from districts around the country.
Yes.
Please come to Arkansas. We have a charter school that's not doing very well.
Yes.
We're about to close. Can you come and take it over? And he says, well, what happened when you take it over? What happened to the mamas and the pops? They don't have to be displaced. They go into the same building. The parents are going to send their kids to the same school. It's going to be run by a different organization and a different board. So the parents aren't displaced.
So if you close a charter down, do you then are those students then allowed to go to other schools? Because first of all, they're going places. It's not like they're sitting at home.
They have the neighborhood school, which is their option to begin with. The first choice was a neighborhood option. In my district, we have other options, like if you want to go to Wisconsin Tech, the performing arts, there are other options which are also open. But then also that charter school will be transferred to another operator that has already demonstrated success. And so the idea is, let your best charters take over charters that aren't doing very well.
Representative Stovall is interesting. I'm hearing from folks say, well, if they go to neighborhood, why can't you just go to neighborhood school? Because black parents are saying the neighborhood school is failing. And if you are a parent, and the school has a proficiency rate of 8, 10, 12%, you might say, I want my kid to be in a better school. And so when it comes to your state laws, how are you able to give the flexibility for folks, for parents to do that? Go right ahead.
So I do want to make mention with charter schools here in the state of Georgia, A charter school can only open up with a petition, which is a contract that they sign with the state or either with the local school district. And in that contract, they have to offer something that the local school district does not offer. So when you start talking about the competition, there's no competition because they only can open and operate. They have to offer some type of curriculum that the current local school district is not offering. And so with that, with the state laws that we have, they're in place. And even when you talk about the money situation that we talked about earlier, the school districts gets about 3 different pots of money. There's a state allocation that we give to each school. Then you have the local allocation, which is your local property taxes that you're paying. Then also anytime you're paying your cell phone bill, your light bill, any bill, when you see that tax that's on there, it goes to that local school. The difference, and also then they also get federal funding. The difference when you talk about charter schools, and we have 2 types of charter schools here in the state of Georgia. One is locally authorized, which means your local school district actually gives permission for that charter school to operate up under their umbrella. But they still have the flexibility to do things, but they don't, a lot of times, don't get the maximum amount of support from that local district as well. Then we also have what's called state commission school, and that's what the legislation that was passed, which was a constitutional amendment that was passed back in 2012 that allowed for another authorizing agent to be able to open and allow for charter schools to be able to operate on the state commission. The difference with the funding is that the state commission schools do not receive local funding. All of their money comes from state allocation. And so that makes it harder. And another thing I did want to make sure that everybody understand is that when charter schools are opening up, they cannot choose which students can attend the charter school. They have to take everyone just like our traditional schools. The difference is the lottery system. And the reason the lottery system is in place is because when they begin with the petition, they have to tell how many students they're going to take in the first year, second year, and third year. If our legislation was open enough to be able to allocate whatever money was needed, just like with your traditional schools, they don't have to tell the state how many they're going to have. They just know that that money is there. But if we were able to change our legislation to allow for money to be allocated to those charter schools, they wouldn't have to have a lottery system.
And Representative Stovall, here's what's interesting. Because again, when you listen to people who throw stuff out there, and somebody just did, oh, they cherry pick. You just said
You can't do that.
You just said there's a lottery system. Explain the lottery system.
Okay. So I will say Gavin's school. So say, for instance, when Gavin decided that he's on him and his team.
Hold on 1 second. Gavin, you have a school.
Yes, sir.
Is it a lottery?
Yes, we had a lottery, but
Now, hold on. Go ahead and explain the lottery, since some folks say you cherry pick.
I can win the lottery.
So what happened with us in the beginning, if you start off, some of your applications will come in and it's first come, first serve. If you
okay,
are
1 second. Let the man talk.
If you have way more applicants than you have spaces, you have to have some kind of random selection process. If you don't and the state finds out, they will shut you down on that one. If they, at minimum, they will give you some serious repercussions.
So how about this, Gavin? How many spots do you have?
So in any grade in each school, we will have 40 spots.
40 spots.
Because we don't have that many rooms.
And
right?
how many applications do you typically get?
So for those 40 spots, we might, in our first year, in our second year, we probably had about, on average, 15 extra. So then you multiply that by each grade, and that'll tell you how many
grades do you have?
This year we have 8, okay, including kindergarten.
So you have all these people who are trying to get in. Obviously, they're trying to get in for a reason because somewhere else isn't working.
Right.
So then you have this random selection process.
Right.
How does that work?
So the reason they do that is because the assumption,
grade, 15 times 7 means overflow. Explain.
The assumption is
One second. You don't run the school. He does. He's going to explain the process. Go ahead, Gavin.
The assumption is that in many cases, they feel that the most aggressive, the higher end parents are going to get in line first. And so they want to make sure that if you are oversubscribed, every parent has a shot and you can't cherry pick. So we literally, it's almost like picking a ball out of the lottery, like when you see on TV, like balls coming out, because you can't attach it to a grade. They look at our application. You cannot ask for grades. You cannot ask a whole bunch of personal information. People will send us letters of recommendation. We're like, that has no bearing. We can't do anything with that. Sorry. They want to get in, but there's nothing we can do. It is a name assigned to a number. The random generator picks a number, and whoever comes out is who gets in.
Representative Stovall, see, here's again what is very interesting about it. You talk about who can get in, who can't. The reality is, again, and I'm hearing a whole bunch of other stuff where people throw out that's not based upon facts. When you talk about the lottery system, Gavin just said, if they get busted, y'all shut them down. They are out of business. But go ahead, I'm going to go here. Representative Stovall, then here.
Yes. So with charter schools, we do have a lot of oversight over charter schools. As versus your traditional schools, those schools usually do not close down. They can be poorly performing for years and years and years, and they still operate. When a charter school, because of that petition, which is a contract that they sign, they agree that they're going to offer these types of curriculums to these type of students. And when they don't do that, the oversight that's on the state level can come in and close the school down. That means they will put the locks on the door. They will liquidate whatever the school desk or whatever the equipment they have is liquidated. And, you know, I look at it as if we were able to do that to our traditional schools when they're not performing, being able to go in and close them down and not leaving that authority on our local school board, I think we'll see a lot of changes going on in our school because they're comfortable. They know that those schools that are zoned, children that are zoned in their district have to attend that school.
Curtis.
Roland, if we're not going to have a conversation based on facts, it's going to be hard to really get to the next level.
No. We only deal with facts. I don't deal with
the idea that
folks making up stuff.
The idea that charter schools are cherry picking is a false narrative. Here's a data point that will kind of speak to this. If you look at most large school districts in America, and you look at the percentage of students who are in charter schools who are from low-income backgrounds, and those who are in a district school, oftentimes charter schools are educating populations. Their enrollment of students who are low income or of students who have IEP is higher than the district average. And so the idea that a charter school would cherry pick students that society has, not us, is harder to educate, just doesn't make a lot of sense. Many places you have, in my district and others, we have what we call a universal enrollment system, which means you have a number of charter schools and some other schools that may, in some instances, innovation schools or autonomous schools. And so parents apply to a central location, which is often run by either the school district or another authority. They and sometimes give you a ranking. I choose these schools, and then they try to match you with a school based on what you choose or based on what you have, where you want your child to go to. And so oftentimes, a charter school is going to get a list of students enrolled in their school, and they have no choice whatsoever to educate those children. In some instances, at percentages that are higher than the school average. And they have, to their credit, a box saying, you want to educate a child who you all said is hard to educate, and you're going to give me less money to do it, and then you're going to hold me at a level of accountability that you haven't held this school that he came from to. So come on, can we just have that conversation, bro?
Gavin, go ahead. Gavin, then Danielle. Gavin, then Danielle.
I think let's be clear, nobody does what we do to compete and to hurt the community. My whole life I was told to go and become as great as you can and come back. When you say I have sacrificed time, money, energy, income to work with my community's kids. I got kids in the 5th grade that cannot read. That came to me that way. I did not.
Oh, no. I want you to repeat that, because for the folks who are sitting here criticizing what you do, you have 5th graders.
I have 5th graders
who cannot read. Which means they once were in kindergarten. And 1st grade, and 2nd grade, and 3rd grade, and 4th grade, which means they came from another school a neighborhood school, a community school, and you got them in the 5th grade, they can't read.
Cannot read.
Go ahead.
I have tested 8 kids in the last 4 months for special ed because somebody missed that. Like, these babies can't function. Their parents missed it. I've had parents crying, saying, thank you. I don't know why nobody did it. So, I mean, we do this because we believe in our community, the kids that look like me, that came from the neighborhood. I grew up in Liberty City, Miami, in a home that was broken, like most of the people probably in this room, whatever we think that means. I mean, our community has said, come back and do this. Most of the schools and most of the situations are run by people who don't look like us. Policy is set by people who don't look like us. This is the opportunity to try to create a model that might actually work for us. And I am ecstatic and happy to share whatever I learned with Dr. Kerstarfin or any superintendent in any traditional public school, because I recognize we better lift all these boats because they got to get better. We got to get better because our kids have got to get better.
Danielle, I'm going to go to you, but I'm going to read this first because this is my point. The Atlanta Public Schools, they're about to vote on what is called a system of excellent schools, okay, that will impact 50, I'm not done, let me walk you through so you can understand facts. That will impact, you might know, not everybody else knows, that will impact 52,000 students at 89 schools. But here's what's interesting. If they approve this, which will create, first of all, grades, 1 to 5-star school rating system, they will take into consideration student attendance, suspension, graduation rates, things along those lines. If they approve it this year, in 2019, Danielle, it won't start until 2023. Which means that if you're a parent and your kid is in the 8th grade, this is not going to have any impact because they will have walked out of high school. And so it's amazing that what Gavin is doing is trying to educate a kid today, and folks are mad at him for doing it, but you have a school system that, look, this sounds great, but it won't happen for 4 years. Damn it, we ain't got 4 years to wait. Go ahead.
Now I have to switch up what I was going to say. But to respond to that, I have a PhD in education policy, and what I learned is that it is not about people and foundations setting the agenda for us. It is about parents. It is about making sure we are all connected to great leaders in education. So I can't wait for 2023. And to be honest with you, there are people who get paid to just sit and think about what should be done to us and not with us. And that's why I'm glad that we have Atlanta Strive and parent engagement. And I'm going to speak for Metro Atlanta. I can't go to PG, right? I'm not Maryland, but for Metro Atlanta, we have parents here who want to put their school in put their son or daughter or grandchild, because we don't talk about grandparents. Mm-hmm. And they want to put their child in a charter school. They get in the charter school, and then the charter school learns about their special needs. And so there are some charter schools that say, well, if you come here, we offer this, that, and this, but not what you need for little JoJo. So that's a reality that we face. And so that's why it's important for us to know our African-American leaders who are taking our children and who are not afraid of special needs, and who understands that we have to teach our children according to their learning style and in a way that works for us. So this 2023, I'm glad about it, but at the same time, when you look at the fact that we got that brand new stadium, let's be honest about that. Let's be honest. And let's also be honest that we are paying more attention to the Washington cluster, and Douglas is failing. That whole cluster is bad. There are things that we need to do as a community. So I'm not sure if I answered your question.
No, you did. You did. But let me ask y'all this here. Woodson Park Elementary, black school? What do y'all think the percentage of students who are reading on grade level is at the school? No, hold up. No, this is real simple. This is very simple. What do y'all think the number is? The question is the number of kids reading on grade level at this elementary school. 5%. Now, is that a charter? It is, but hold up. It is now.
It should be.
Here's the point. We are sitting here and engaging, as far as I'm concerned, in some of the silliest discussions whatsoever. Because when that man is dealing with a 5th grader who can't read, she just said the state is spending $1.6 billion on prisons. Guess what the state is doing? Looking at 5th grade reading rates and 5th grade math rates. So if you sit in this room and say you want criminal justice reform, well, damn it, you better have education reform, because education reform will also impact criminal justice reform. And how in the world do we spend time fighting black educators who are trying to educate our kids because we want to still support a system that keeps failing our kids? That to me is called insanity. Go ahead, Jason.
I just wanted to say that while we're speaking of Woodson Park,
we can't hear Jason. Go ahead.
While we're speaking of Woodson Park Academy.
And ma'am, you can keep talking, but there are audience members around you who want to hear the discussion. So I ask you to keep quiet so the people around you can learn, because they might have kids who they want to ensure has a future. Jason, go ahead.
All right, so just in the spirit of honoring Dr. McClendon Krim, who was the principal of Woodson Park, she recently passed away. And I want us to be mindful of how we support educators. We haven't talked about how we're supporting people who look like us that are on this stage that are educating our children. Most importantly, we have not talked about how we can empower our students to speak for themselves. I know that Brother Knight is over there. We work for the education post and we advocate. And Danielle is familiar with that, 50 Can, and other organizations. And we are empowering students to say, hey, school is boring. This is not working for us. And Danielle mentioned something about learning styles. If we don't know what the Lexile rating is for Georgia, we should look that up. It's very alarming. The other thing that is alarming is special needs. When we look at special education across the spectrum in Georgia, most children who are black and brown are suffering. I have about 83 6th graders on my caseload who have special needs. Most of my black boys' IEP goals are not even complete. They have BIPs, which are behavior intervention plans, and all of the districts are focusing on their discipline, but they're not focusing on how to teach these black and brown children. And so when Danielle is speaking about special education, we are making strides in the charter world, but overall our children are still suffering. So where does that work begin? That's engagement. That's advocacy. If we don't know what to advocate for, then the same problems are going to continue to carry on. So I'm saying that to say, we need you all down at the Gold Dome. I'm going to keep reiterating that, because if we're not present, then again, Shauna makes a statement all the time that if you are not at the table, you're on the menu. And that is so true, because we always are. And so if we're not present for our children, they're going to continue to have the same problems in the educational system. Again, that was not designed for us to succeed.
Yeah, it's not just enough for us to be at the Gold Dome. We need to set a black agenda, and we need to demand what we want. I know that's hard to say, right? That means somebody's got to lead that work and do that work. I know that Georgia Can is here. I know that there are a lot of other organizations that are here, but we need to start holding our organizations, such as Book, accountable, because we don't have a black education lobbyist. We don't have a strong one compared to all those white lobbyists down there fighting for choice. We need to make sure that we have accountability. I used to be the director when we were thinking about putting out some legislation on vouchers. I'm sorry, y'all, I went there. And we drafted the legislation.
No, you could go there with vouchers, because we ran a poll and 72% of black parents got no problem with vouchers.
Yeah, the
black parents want the kids educated. That's all they want. Go ahead.
The bill's already been
Those
drafted.
are facts.
But when I started talking about and asking about accountability, I got blocked from my own conference call. So as a leader in this nonprofit space, when I do my best to make sure that we support the Gavin Sams, Dr. Nina Gilberts, Alicia Morgans, and educators in this world, you don't know what I face every day. You don't know. You don't know how I have to partner. You don't know that when they close a charter school down, no one is holding accountable how they communicate that, right? And so at Connect, my organization, we work and talk to the parents so that they find their school choice options. But then I go by myself to the state and say, the way you shut that down was irresponsible. Here's why. Here's what happened. Why don't you look at what's going on in other states so that we can learn from that? So we carry a lot. And in terms of advocacy, I have moved on to agency. So I'm glad that you use that, because we have not just a voice, but if we can get out of slavery, if we can teach ourselves how to read, there's so much that we can do. And we didn't even get started yet in Georgia. And the fact that in Metro Atlanta, we are majority African Americans here, more can be done. We cannot continue to allow them to set our agenda. We have to claim it back.
I want to go back to Aretta, because you talk about being a parent. And how does it make you feel to be somebody trying to fight for the education of black kids, but then you got black folks who are fighting you and trying to do it, and then when you ask them, what's your plan?
Or where they send their kids. Ask them where they send their kids.
Well, their kids. I mean, it has to be, I mean, and the other piece is, why is this an either or? Why can't it be and?
That's actually what I was going to say. I don't think it's an either or. I think it's a yes and situation in terms of how can we support our district schools so they get what they need and the children are getting educated, right? And as well as how can we give parents choice. I mean, when you wake up in the morning, you make many choices. You choose what shoes you're going to wear. You know, you choose the outfit you're going to put on. I mean, you choose the way you wear your hair. Why can't you choose how you want to educate your children?
In fact, I'm about to really get in somebody's seat right now. What campus are we on?
The house.
Morehouse.
So of all the folks who say they don't like taxpayer money going to charters which are public, how many of y'all realize that when you get a Pell Grant to come to Morehouse,
Public money.
taxpayer dollars is being used to fund a private college? How many of y'all like Spelman? Last I checked, Spelman is private. So if you get a grant from the federal government to go to Spelman, that means taxpayer dollars are going to support a private college. No, there's not more to it. No, it's very basic. When you make the argument, because see, it's very interesting that if you have Medicare, here's the deal, health care. If you have Medicare or Medicaid, the government does not require you to only go to public hospitals. You are using taxpayer dollars to go to private hospitals. And so it's interesting to me that, and here's the other thing. When I was in New Orleans, we did a special. Y'all can go to our YouTube channel. I loved it when people were like, what? We need to have a school down the street. I said, okay. I understand your point. So I ask y'all, when you go to your favorite restaurant, is it in your neighborhood? No. I ain't done. I'm not done. When you want to go to the movies, is it actually in your neighborhood? When you want to go dancing or partying, is your favorite spot down the street? When you want to go shopping, is your favorite store down the street? So it's amazing to me how we'll drive to our favorite restaurant, we'll drive to our favorite movie spot, we'll drive to our favorite club, we'll drive to the favorite shopping center, but then we'll get an attitude if we say, how far do I have to go to ensure my kid get a better education? I'm just trying to understand, what are your values and priorities? Because if you drive 20 miles to go to a club, damn it, 2 miles to find a better school, to me, for my child, ain't that bad. But go right ahead. That's just me. Sorry. Go ahead.
The good brother, he mentioned Douglas High School. There's also an outstanding high school named after, anybody, who went to Mays? Anybody went to Mays? Mays High School named after pretty much the architect of the civil rights movement, the president of Morehouse College, who was a mentor to Dr. King. Benjamin Eliza Mays spent his life as president of Morehouse College. And when he retired, what's the first thing he did? He ran to be the chair of the school board. And you think, after everything he had learned from being the president of this institution, he said, like many people in that stage in their life, saying, where am I going to spend the rest? Where's my time the most valuable? The Atlanta area sends more students to Morehouse College than any other area in the country. And so I think Dr. Mays said, if I want Morehouse to be around for this guy named Curtis Valentine, who might come down the road 20, 30 years from now, or someone in the Atlanta metro area, then maybe I need to improve the school system to create this pipeline into our HBCUs. And so I think we have to put that into context. And I want to say just, if we leave here and people don't advocate for change, not just through not through retweeting something or getting a selfie with his brother afterwards and say you were here, which many of y'all gonna do. I think the idea is that how many of you all are voting, and many people in the room are gonna say you do, because I'm kind of preaching to a choir, I can tell by the tone. How many people vote in school board elections? I know you. I said I know y'all, but we're talking about in most places in the single and teens. Most people cannot tell you who their school board rep is. Many people can't tell you who their state legislative rep is, or who the city council, or what district they live in, or the fact that they may live in one district but send their kids into it or work in one. And so we have to get to the point where we didn't just come out here for an exercise and you said what you said, I said what I wanted to say, you felt better because you got it off your chest. I came here, I got my selfie too. I went back and everybody said, Kurt, man, you doing your thing. No. The beauty of the civil rights movement was they changed laws.
Boom.
Unless you are changing laws and unless you are disrupting things, people are fine with us barking and making these comments because you ain't hurting nobody. Let me tell you something like this. I love Black Lives Matter, but stand your ground is still a law in Florida.
Yep.
We still have laws that the Koch brothers are still advocating for-profit prisons, voting rights taken away from each other. We have more states that have stand your ground laws now than they had when Trayvon Martin was killed. Let's talk. We have to put our time and our resources where the power structures. You have a doctorate in public policy right here. We don't have a lot of time to be spending time trying to figure out what door to knock down and where the policy. She could tell you who to talk to tomorrow. You get 1,000 calls to these two people, you will change the law. Don't call everybody. You vote, you knock on doors. When things happen, a hearing happens, you knock down the Memphis lift. They send hundreds of people to these school board meetings.
Yep.
And I'm a school board member. When we see that list of people who come in and talk,
boom.
We have a conversation before the meeting. Hey, man, we got 100 people coming out talking about this issue, man.
There you go.
What we going to do about this? Because I got calls, you got calls, you trying to get reelected, you trying to get reelected. What we going to do about this? Make some people afraid, because when you barking and when you getting your retweets. Come
on, Doc.
I ain't afraid of that, man.
Come on, Doc.
Don't scare me.
Loretta, go ahead.
What scares me is policy change. Otherwise, we just out here and we had a good time, and I had some good time with my black folk, which I love to do, but I want us to go for another level. I want people to get upset with this.
Want you to jump in, so I got some audience questions. Go ahead.
We understand that people equal power, and I want to invite all of you out March 2nd to Washington Park at 11 o'clock.
Say it again.
I want to invite all of you out to Washington Park at 11 o'clock so we can engage, inform, and empower and make a change, because people equal power.
Hold up. Now, I need you to give them like a contact, a website or a number or email.
Okay,
maybe.
so you can find us on The Atlanta Thrive on either Instagram or Facebook, The Atlanta Thrive. And you can also visit us at the table out front. We'll be out front.
There you go. Representative Stovall, here's a question for you. Do you feel the state of Georgia will replace its public schools with charters, and what happens to students who are not allowed into charters?
I think we addressed that earlier, but I'll go back over it again. For this, charter schools are public schools. And the definition that you can always use is that there's no tuition charge for any student who attends a charter school. And that is the definition on how you're able to determine whether a charter school is a private school or a public. But in the state of Georgia, all charter schools are public schools. And it's not privatization. It's all public schools. One of the other things I did want to make mention when we start talking about school choice, it amazes me that in our traditional schools, we have magnet schools. And magnet schools are able to determine which students can attend there by the testing.
And also, don't you have to apply?
Yes, you do.
Hold on 1 second. You have to apply to the magnet school.
Yes.
Don't you find it interesting how folks ain't got no problem with magnet schools, but you have to apply to get in, which means somebody's not going to get in, and they'll be rejected. Go right ahead.
Right. And so I think when we start making those comparisons, we need to also look at, like I said, the structure of magnet schools. And they are able to determine which type of students are going to attend. I attended a magnet school at Southside High School, which is now Maynard Jackson High School. And so I had to apply to get in. I had to keep my GPA up to a certain level. And there were certain students that were in the other side of the school who could not get into the magnet school. And so that's discriminatory right there by itself, because more resources were given to the magnet school students than they were to the ones that were in the traditional school students as well. And one other thing I did want to make mention for the state of Georgia, when we talk about our traditional schools, the flexibility that we have given as state legislators to our traditional schools, and I do want to recognize former Representative Ron Mayo, who was one of the leading charge with this particular legislation, is that they now have the flexibility to decide what quality of teachers they want to have. They have the flexibility on the schools, on the classroom sizes. They had a flexibility on how they're going to spend the money. So all the things that charter schools have, the traditional schools have them as well. Because that was one of the biggest arguments when the whole thing came up about charter schools. That when you all let charter schools do this, they're allowed to do this, give us the same flexibility. Well, now the traditional schools have that flexibility. So why aren't they using the flexibility? They have more money that's allocated that they're able to spend than our charter schools. So they can do the same thing so that parents don't have to travel outside of their area. But for right now, until the traditional schools step up, and some of them have, and some of them have not. But until then, what are parents supposed to do? That's the answer that I want to give. And when there are others like myself who stand out in the gap, just like with Representative Mayo and also Representative Alicia Thomas Morgan, we are ostracized by our Democratic Party. And it happens a whole lot. That we use a few of us on one side of the line, and then we're beat up. So you all who are in support of parents having choice, you need to talk to your legislators on the Senate and the House side and let them know how you feel. Because if you don't voice that opinion, and then you wonder why the charter schools do not receive as much money as they should, it's because the legislative body is voting against it. The majority of them are voting against it, especially the black legislators are voting against it.
So,
hold up. I got a question. I got a question here, ma'am. Your running commentary really is bugging the folks around you. So please allow them to actually listen. Here's also to your point, because somebody hollered privatization of education. I literally just stood here and said we on a private campus, and public dollars. And matter of fact, let me just go ahead and really get real specific. Since you want to keep talking privatization, the reality is this: the average HBCU, 80 to 90% of their budgets are driven by the financial aid of the students. That means that private HBCUs are existing because of public dollars. So explain to me how black people love to shout HBCUs, which are here because of public dollars, but then when a black parent wants the elementary school or middle school or high school student educated in a charter or some other option, then we go, oh, bad idea. You can't say I support a HBCU that's here because of public dollars, but then get mad at the school over here, because guess what? If our kids ain't reading in the 5th grade, they can't get into Morehouse. They can't get into Spelman. They can't go to CAU. So at some point, you got to make up your mind. You're going to educate kids K through 12, or you're going to focus on college. And if you're not trying to fix it, all you're doing is running your damn mouth.
Hey, Roland. We're going to sustain that one. That's sustained.
And that wasn't said privately, it was said publicly.
Let me say this. Let me. Everybody about to clutch their pearls in a second. I'm about to give you a number. Real quick. He just mentioned Morehouse College. He just mentioned, one of the finest institutions. What percentage do you think of Morehouse alums get back to this institution?
Come on.
What percentage? We talk about our black colleges, our communities. What percentage of Morehouse alums get back to the school, thus making it more of an onus on us to rely on that? Try 17.
Hold on. No, y'all gonna really say something. That's high.
17%. And so she talked about black faces, black leadership. We had control of our schools for a very when every time we were fully funded and we were running our own schools, we had control for a very long time. And when we have Morehouse men and Spelman alum, my wife is a Spelman alum, their numbers is close to it's still in the 40s. Majority of Spelman women don't get back. We went off, we got our degrees, we made a little money, went to a little community, put our kids in a little private school. And I said, what about Morehouse? What about the 83? What are 83% of y'all doing with y'all money?
Hold on, you said 17. No.
83% ain't giving.
No. See, y'all were like, ooh, 17. The president of the Florida A&M Alumni Association was on my show and said 5% of FAMU graduates give back. Not 1,000, give a nickel. The president of Howard.
I said percentage,
I ain't done. The president of Howard University said when he arrived, 3.7% of all undergraduate graduates gave. Now it's up to 10%. The Wilberforce president said when he arrived, 1% of their graduates gave. Then when he left, it was at 9%. The giving rate of the average giving rate of HBCUs is really between 5 and 8%. Claflin has the highest giving of any HBCU. It exceeds 50%. Why we right now are facing, you already know about Morris Brown. You also, other HBCUs are withering on the vine. The reason
Bennett today.
The reason the Benjamin Mays example was vital was because what Mays figured out was if we do not deal with K through 12, there will be no Morehouse men. There will be no Spelman women. And so we are sitting here arguing and mad as to why this way or that way. I will say again, I do not care. You know what the balance is? Failure, not failing. No, that's no, you want balance? 5th grader can't read. You want balance? Black kids who are in the 8th grade with 2nd grade math proficiency. Do you want balance? I just read for you the school with 5% of the students reading on grade level.
Let me say something.
I'm just saying.
I want to speak to that.
Go right ahead.
So when I mentioned, charter schools are still only a fraction of the majority of most public school systems.
4%.
And so I'm waking up every morning, and members of the school board in Atlanta are waking up every morning and fighting for 100% of the students, even though those in charters, those in district, and those in schools that are under their authority. And so the idea that charter schools are taking over, I think because the term charter has become such synonymous with so much passion that people, as soon as you say it, everyone wants to gravitate towards that term. I think we should call it something else. And then have a conversation around, do we need schools that have a certain level of autonomy over doing things? Yes. Do we need schools that have a certain level of accountability that says they're not doing well? Yes. Should we have schools that have options to go out and identify additional resources so that we can give things our students need? Yes. Call it what you want. Call it Roland Martin University. I don't care what you call it. But let's give everybody the same chances that you give your child as well. Let's talk about that, because I'm fighting for not only just I got 10 charter schools in my district. I got 200 that aren't. So I'm fighting for them too, because my kids go to a traditional public school. They don't go to a charter. And my wife is a principal in a traditional public school and not in a charter.
I want to give some facts.
For all of them.
I want to give some facts. I want to give some facts so you have facts. Someone said, one second. Someone said privatization. These are facts. These are facts. Only 12% of all charters are for-profit. 12, okay? 65% of all charters are what are called small CMOs or single entities, largely nonprofit. Now, give me another fact, okay? I'm not done. Another fact. 6% of students in America attend charter schools. That means 94% of kids in America go to traditional schools. So explain to me how 6% is the problem and not 94. I don't understand that. Now, I got some questions from the audience. Jason Allen, of what school are you board chair? And the question is, how do you advocate for funding and resources for that school? That was a question from the audience.
Awesome. I'm the board chair for Ivy Prep Academy, and actually if you go to edlanta.org, I have my letter that I sent to our legislators about funding for all schools. It's available on there, but Edlanta is a mechanism that I use to advocate for not just school choice, but also improving our public traditional schools.
Danielle, can you speak to the difference between private and public? I'm assuming between private schools and public schools. First of all, that's a question from the audience. You don't control the mic. Go ahead and answer the question.
Okay. So
somebody has a question. You can talk as loud as you want to, but she gonna get an opportunity to answer the question. Danielle, go right ahead.
A public school, there's a level of accountability that you have for a public school. We all know in the state of Georgia we have traditional public schools. We also have state charter schools and local charter schools. So when you think about a public school, know that there's a system of accountability. For your private schools, yes, there might be a board, but that accountability piece for that education piece may not be there. So for private schools, it's important for parents to be careful and not make the assumption that that's the best match for their child just because it's private. So for instance, if you have a child with a disability and have an IEP and you use the special needs scholarship program, which is, you can use a voucher to go to a private school. That private school does not have to serve your IEP. Now, this gentleman in his school and Ivy Prep, they have to because they are a public school, even though they're a charter school. And your traditional public schools have to do that as well. So that's the difference between a private and public. And for whoever asks that question, if you want to talk about it more, I'll be outside at the end of this. You can come to the Ed Connect table.
I'm a mom of a 4-year-old boy. How do I find the best school for him? And what's the criteria I need to have to determine if the school is up to par? Anybody?
Well, I definitely you said she said it's 4-year-old?
She's a mom of a 4-year-old boy.
Okay. Definitely knowing that early education is the key. And identifying, and now with the state of Georgia, we've now moved toward quality rated schools for our pre-K schools. And with that, they now have to go through a more rigorous requirement for the type of curriculum that they're actually delivering. And by 2020, all the daycare centers, early learning centers in the state of Georgia will have to be quality rated. And that's the 1-star, 2-star, 3-star. So being able to research on the different schools and what it is that they're able to offer, going in and talking with the owners of that early learning center, talking to some of the parents to see how they like the particular school, and then even moving forward with your elementary school. You can always go online with the Georgia Governor's Office of Student Achievement or the Department of Education to be able to research some information on the schools in your area and going and talking with the principal.
Aretta?
So I was going to agree, definitely do your research. There are apsinsights.org is a great resource for going.
apsinsights.org.
apsinsights.org. You can look up all schools. You can look up not just their CCRPI scores, which is their Career and College Ready Performance Index. You can also look at their English and math proficiency scores. You could look at Title I percentages. You can look at attendance rates. There's a lot of good information. But aside from that, I encourage you to go to the school and visit the school and ask the principal, ask the leaders, what is your vision for the school? See, does that align with what it is that you have for your child? Talk to other parents who attend that school. Ask them to tell you about the good and the bad, because nowhere is perfect, but there has to be a place that's going to be a good choice for you. So do the quantitative and the qualitative research to find out what's best. And also really understand your child and what your child needs. So I understood that my kid didn't need a lot of free time. Free time equaled trouble for her. She needed discipline. She needed structure. That was specific to my kid. But my best friend's kid, complete opposite. So know your kid, their needs and their learning styles, and then do your research in matching what's the fit.
There was a state representative in Chicago who wanted to shut down an online school. And I had her on WVON radio. And I said to Representative Monique Davis, I said, have you talked to any of the parents who have kids in online school? She said, no. Have you talked to any of the students who go to the online school? She said, no. I said, okay, how are you trying to shut something down? You haven't even talked to the people who kids go there. She said, I just believe that kids should go to brick and mortar schools. I said, Representative Davis, you almost 70. I said, my nephew, who is at the time was 3, he was able to get my iPad, and Netflix was not on the home screen. It was in a folder. He was 3. He had my iPad, found Netflix, found the cartoon he watches on Netflix, and was watching the cartoon, and I thought it was my brother's iPad, it was mine. I said, Representative Davis, kids are coming out the womb learning technology. I said, before you try to shut something down, will you at least go talk to the kids? Because every kid is not meant to a traditional school. She went and did it. She came back and said, I was wrong. I said, you were willing to shut something. You were going to go to the state and use your power to shut something down, and you hadn't even bothered to talk to the parents or the kids to say, is that working? And it was nonsensical. Question, Gavin. Here in Georgia, what is the accountability of charter schools? Because the question says that when parents choose school choice and the school closes, this fails the student and ultimately the community. So what's the accountability, the oversight in Georgia for your school?
So we are actually, our oversight body is both the Georgia Department of Education and the State Charter School Commission.
So you have oversight?
I have absolute oversight.
Okay.
And they are...
He just said who?
The Georgia Department of Education.
He just said who? Lord, repeat it again. Repeat it again.
The Georgia Department of Education, which oversees all schools in Georgia, oversees all charter schools as well. So every public school is overseen by the State Department of Education.
And when you say oversee, what do they oversee?
Everything we do, from education to nutrition to finance. There are about 10 departments in the DOE, and they all have a direct line to us. They send auditors out twice a year. The commission sends auditors out. The State Charter School Commission authorizes us. They also send auditors out twice a year.
So hold up. The State Charter Commission and the Georgia Department of Education both send auditors out?
Yes.
So you have oversight?
I have a lot of
Okay,
oversight.
I thought so. That pretty much answers that question. All this, okay, all right, here we go. Okay, you're not like the board. Okay, so explain to me then, since you want to have a board, that's great, what's up with all these failing Atlanta schools? No. If you want to talk about a board, see, this real simple. This real simple. No. We can let him sit there. See, this is the fundamental. No. He fine. This is the fundamental problem I have. We keep yelling, board. Show me failing schools and what the board is doing. I just read to you in Atlanta. They are going to vote in 2 weeks on a new system. So what is it? Take your pick. Which is it? Are you mad at the charters? Or you're saying a board? But if the schools have been failing, what's up with the board? No. Since y'all want to talk, if the schools keep failing and y'all keep saying board, why are the schools failing? Why does that black element... So here's my question. So for you, gentrification is the reason for it. Gentrification. So if a school in Atlanta has been failing for 20 or 30 years, whose fault is that? Okay. All right. Now y'all saying by design. Okay. So here we have an opportunity to control our schools, but you got a problem with that. That makes no sense to me. Why did they vote to stay and help their community school? All right. So the question is, why not focus on the community school versus creating or supporting a charter school? Jason, go ahead.
I believe that you can do both. I started out as a public traditional school advocate, and then, I was introduced to school choice. That doesn't mean that I still don't go to Ignatius Jones and FL Stanton, and I know their data. I know what's happening because those are my community schools. I went to those schools, so I know what's happening, and that's what I encourage other people to do. I support Ivy just as much as I support Douglas, just as much as I support my elementary schools that I went to, and that's what we all have to do. We can't make it a... Hold on.
He is talking.
Brother Shakir, hold on.
Here we go. Go ahead, Doc. Go ahead.
That's a good point. I could have, because my zone school was Washington, but during that time, during the 90s, there was a lot of gang activity, and my parents did not want me to go to Washington. So I was able to go to Douglas through the magnet program. Like a lot of my classmates, and a lot of my friends. That is school choice. My parents had a choice. If they did not have that choice, I could have had a different outcome. And
right.
So that is the reality that we have to realize. Why are we in a position to say what somebody's choice should be? Why should I say, oh, this parent should have a choice and that parent
That's
should
right.
not?
Now, here's the next question here. When we speak of resources needed in schools, it's not simply money. For children who have a lot of trauma, there needs to be more people services. Now, here is, again, one of the fundamental problems. Unfortunately, our schools are becoming community service centers. You have schools where, now you got to ask why. Now what happens is, in our schools, they want to deal with nutrition, deal with dental, deal with mental. Why? Because cities and counties over the last 30 years got rid of community health centers. So if you want to talk, so the deal is, and again, with family of educators, the problem we're seeing today is that education is actually 6th and 7th in schools today because they were forcing schools to deal with all the other issues. A school is there to deal with education, not healthcare, not dental, not nutrition. And so public folks out here, you should be challenging the city council of Atlanta, the county commissioners, to reopen and to also fund community health centers so schools can focus on what they're supposed to do as education and not be community service centers. All right, next question. Special education has never been fully funded. The idea is still applicable for charter schools. And so how do we deal with education, special education funding with traditional schools and charter schools? Anybody?
It begins with starting to understand how special education works. There are so many children you're in special education just because our teachers don't know how to reach them. So we have to be able to support teachers. We have to be able to support parents. It starts there. It also starts with legislation. A lot of our policies are designed and connected to the mechanism of how black boys act. So when you think about discipline is centered around, okay, we have all these deficiencies of how black boys act in classrooms. So policies are created around that. So we want to make changes in special education. We have to start with erasing the whole magnitude or the mindset that special education begins with discipline, because that's where a lot of our children are. They're in special education because they won't sit still. They won't be quiet. They won't walk in a straight line. They won't do what the teacher is telling them to do at that moment. And that's why a lot of kids are caught in the special education system.
In fact, what you ought to do is, we tried to play it, but we had some audio issues. You ought to go to YouTube and look at a video by Prince EA. And there's a video called The School System on Trial. And when you see this video, it's about a 6-minute video, what he lays out is that the education system that we have today in 2019 is literally the exact same system that we had for the last 150 years in terms of desks lined up in a row, kids raise their hand to ask a question, because that system was created for a totally different economy. Now, for mass production. Not only that, I want you to look up, this is your homework, I want you to look up the Carnegie method. Let me say it again. No, it's not Carnegie, it's Carnegie. It's the Carnegie method. And what that is, so the current education system, in terms of how we do units, in terms of what is taught, that was created when a group of industrialists got together in the 1800s, and they had meetings all across the country. They excluded, especially North Carolina, black folks from participating, where these rich industrialists created the model of how education is taught. And so that is X number of classes, X number of, in terms of the whole system. And so part of the problem we have today is that we have kids in 2019 who are literally being taught the same way we taught kids in 1890. And so what you're seeing is, and I've been an advisor for XQ schools. Laureen Powell Jobs, a widow of Steve Jobs, has a group called Emerson Collective, and they had this mass initiative, Rethink High School. So go look it up, XQ America. And they've given out $100 million to people to rethink high school. Some of the ideas that we got were stunning. One of the schools, the school is located in a museum. Another school, the curriculum was actually established by the students. And so if you go to XQ America, go to the YouTube channel, their Facebook page, you see all these stories. So what that points to is where we are now is, and this, which is why it goes to the issue of charters as well, is that the point of innovation is not that we teach every child the exact same way, that we create different schools for different ways. And to your point, one school may be, you know what, we're going to be outdoors. Another one may be indoors. But you create different ways of teaching and get away from this as only one way to educate every child.
Can I give you one more data point? There are 15,000 school districts in America. Most of them are run by elected officials, like here in Atlanta.
Boards.
68% of school board members in America do not have children in the school system in which they are on the board. And so, as a school board member, I have a wife who is a middle school principal in the largest middle school in my county, which is 1,300 students. I have 2 children who go to a public school in my district. I have a daily feedback loop. My wife says, Curtis, you passed some bill, it ain't working, you ain't got no money for it, I got classroom, it ain't working. My kid comes and says, Dad, I'm bored, this is not working, iPad. And so when you have leadership who is coming home to the daughter who's on Netflix, who done found it, and you saying, my daughter is on YouTube more than she is out doing other things. And I'm saying, okay, I could take the YouTube away. I could take her iPad away and say, go outside and play like we did before. But at the same time, we understand that the world is moving in a different direction. And if we don't move with it, we are going to be left behind. And you can see I've traveled across the country, around the world, studying what are other school districts in Finland and Poland and Canada and South Africa doing, because we're in a global economy. And the people you are trying to compete with for jobs are not the people sitting next to you anymore. They are across the world. And if you are not moving at a speed that's comparable or faster, and you wonder what happened, where did jobs go, what happened to this city, why is this community no longer viable, what happened to this? Because we were moving too slow, and we were too busy thinking about adults and how adults felt about themselves, and not about the kids who we knew were going to be tomorrow's employers and employees. And so we got to have that conversation where we're talking about, let's put leadership in people who are going to have to deal with this, not just at school board meetings, not just at city council meetings, not just at state legislative meetings, but you have to come home with it. You gotta leave. You gotta wake up with it in the morning and saying, "Are you going to educate my baby?"
That's right.
The way I want her to educate it. Because if you're not, then I'm going to have to make some changes.
Representative Stovall, is online education allowed in Georgia?
Yes, sir.
Yes, online education is actually another type of charter school as well, and it is free. Like I said before, there's no tuition charge, and most of the times the parents who choose for their children to enroll in online schooling is because of the flexibility. I know my daughter, during her 11th grade year, she was online. My niece and nephew at one point were online students. And currently in Clayton County, there's a unique model, Ambitious X Learning Center, where they have infused brick and mortar with online school with Georgia Connections Academy. And it has allowed them to, for their students, when they're not online doing their classes, they've been able to take them on educational resources type of trips. And they've actually, I think to the date, since school started in August, they've actually gone on about 60 trips around the state. They even have gone out of the state because of that flexibility that they're allowed because of online schooling.
I'm going to go down the line, final comments, and then, because I wait to other questions, 30 seconds each, go.
So again, I want to invite you guys out to the barbecue on March 2nd. I also want to invite you to the APS Excellence and Equity meeting on the 25th. Roland mentioned it briefly, but that is a community meeting at Hope Hill at 6:30. And March 4th, there's the board vote at the APS building at 130 Trinity. I want to invite you out to that as well. People equal power. Let's stand for excellence. Let's stand for quality schools, and let's stand for these kids getting educated, our kids getting educated.
Roland gave me 30 seconds to do this real quick. Everyone look around the room. Please look around. Just turn around, look around. Look at your neighbor. Look at your neighbor's face and say, I love you. I'm serious. I need you. We in this together. We got to walk away from this saying, don't walk away from tonight thinking that I'm against you and the person who made a comment does not feel about children in the system any different than you do. We cannot walk away as adversaries. This is way too important. And our children can't afford for us. They're sitting around looking at us, wondering what's going on. I'm going to leave you with this. Here's an old African proverb. When the elephants fight, the grass suffers. These children are waiting for us to get our stuff together. They can't wait. And so we have to leave here with the determination to fight for what's best for our children, because in many cases they have no voice. Thank you all for coming out.
Danielle?
Wow, there's so much I can say. What I will say is that we focus so much on policy sometimes, we don't think about home. So one thing that I want to say is that do not leave here not thinking about your own child or your own cousin that you can be of service to and that you can help. Don't go to the Capitol if you didn't help your home first. That's my only message.
Gavin?
So I just don't want to leave here with the false narrative that this is somehow a battle between black educators in traditional public schools and black educators in charter schools. That seems to be what always happens.
Yep.
We wind up getting in a space and we wind up going at each other, getting divided, and nothing ever happens. We are actually on the same side. There are things, most of the educators I know who are in leadership in traditional public schools are amazing people. I have consulted with districts all around this country, traditional public, and have met amazing people. it is a challenge for all of us. I think what Ms. LaSure said, Dr. LaSure said, was the key. We don't actually have an agenda for our kids. Traditional public charter. The major problem that we all have is that there is a regime started by policymakers whose children aren't in these schools that focus on test taking. We do need to measure what our kids know, but when the score itself becomes the thing, we'll go get it however we want. And it won't have anything to do with learning. It will have to do with getting a number. While the rest of the world has moved on. The suburbs don't care. Private schools don't care. Upwardly mobile people don't care. So we have to think about what we really want for our kids. Because by the time we get better at testing, everybody else would have got better at languages, technology, thinking, and everything else. So that's a whole nother conversation. But we need an agenda that talks about how we raise our kids at home and what things we need to teach them in school that will matter for them, separate and apart from other communities, because there is a different need.
Jason.
When President Trump was elected, our former executive director of IB reached out to me, Alicia Thomas Cromartie, with tears, crying. There were girls who did not have a choice. Those were Muslim girls. I wrote about them this week because they weren't able to go to their community school because of their faith and how they looked. And so it's important that we don't take anyone's choice away, because there are people who are literally depending on the autonomy to have a choice. So we do this work together. I'm a traditional public school special education teacher, but I'm also the board chair of IB Prep. So you can do both. You can support public traditional schools and charter schools. We can do this work together for our children.
Representative Stovall.
As a state legislator, it's important, very important to me that I hear from my constituents, and not just from the ones that are in my district, because I am state elected. And when I'm at the Capitol, like we're in session now, we're voting on laws that affect the entire state of Georgia. And it's important for you, if you don't remember anything else tonight, is that your voice does matter. But like Dr. LaSure said, you have to come with a plan. And if we're able to come up with a plan for educating our black children, then that's a platform that we can be able to use to push the legislators who look like me down there and some who don't look like me. And so in closing, what are you willing to give up for the better education for our children here, especially our black children in Georgia?
All right. Mimi, bring them out, Mimi. Mimi, bring them out. Y'all come on. So while we've been in here, we had child care. So y'all come on. Y'all come over here. Come over here. I need the panelists. Y'all can stand up. Come on. Y'all come over here. How you doing? I want y'all to stand right here. Come on. Now you short. I need you to stand up there. You taller. Come on. I need you to file in. Come on, bro. You short. You stand right over here. There you go. You got something to say? Go ahead.
I'm
It's on.
Are you can if you
I don't speak kid, but I know what you're talking about. I appreciate it. So here's the deal. Thank you, darling. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Here's the deal. The reason we are doing these town halls and the reason we were invited here is not because of any elected officials. You co-signing? No elected officials. It's not because of administrators. It's not because of teachers. It's not because of school board members. It's not because of anybody. It's because of them. What has to happen is we must completely change why we are fighting for education. I'm tired of hearing the people talk about contracts. I'm tired of hearing the people talk about unions. I'm tired of hearing people talk about pensions. I'm tired of hearing them talk about public policy, because what you will not hear any of them say, kids. Because that's not why. George Parker, who I mentioned earlier, George Parker ran the teachers union in Washington, D.C. when Michelle Reed was there. And he went to, no, she's not going to sit down. She's going to stand with you. George Parker went to elementary school, and a young Hispanic girl came up to him and hugged him, and she said, Dr. Parker, thank you for fighting for us. And when he got in his car, he said it hit him. He said, my job as the head of the teachers union has nothing to do with fighting for that girl. He said, my job, he said, I had just spent $10,000 to get a teacher put back in the classroom who had no business be back in the classroom. It was at that point that George Parker said, I have got to advocate for education by any means necessary. George is now a supporter of parental choice in what we're doing. This was said earlier, look around at each person and say, I love you. I want y'all to look around at each person right now and just look at them. And this is what I need you to understand, since we're in Atlanta and we're on the campus of Morehouse where Dr. King was a student at 16. We're on the campus where Maynard Jackson was a student here at 14. There are more people who are sitting in this room right now than the number of black people who met in a basement in Montgomery on December 1st, 1955. When you look at the civil rights movement, it was because a handful of people launched a one-day boycott. The Montgomery bus boycott was not supposed to go 381 days. It was a one-day boycott that went to 5 days, and then it went 381. They then said, what's next? Then they went to Albany, Georgia, the Albany movement, the Nashville movement. 4 students at North Carolina A&T launched lunch counter sit-ins. They didn't ask anybody's permission. Freedom rides, all of those different things. Why am I saying that? Because black people changed America in a 13-year time span. Black people have forced America to live up to what it wrote down in the Declaration of Independence, all men are created equal. Black people has taught America what it truly means to be an American. Black folks, when they had the Arab uprising, they were wearing signs that said, I am a man. The same signs black sanitation workers wore in Memphis in '68. If you go to India, you can go on an MLK Drive. When they were in Poland with Walenza and the Solidarity Movement, it was singing Lift Every Voice and Sing. The Eastern Russians were singing We Shall Overcome. How is it that the world has picked up on the movement that black folks led, and we got black folks in 2019 who do not have the same capacity and courage to fight to change? If we are talking about changing Atlanta, and again, I don't live here, but we're here because what should come out of this meeting is a group, and whether it's book, whether it's Atlanta Thrive, whether y'all want to create the steering committee that is composed of critics and supporters, what should come out of this gathering is a steering committee, an organizing committee, whatever you want to call it, that creates that agenda Danielle talked about, that then leads to a change in how black kids are educated. We cannot continue on this path because in 24 years, America is going to be majority people of color. And when I interviewed Winnie Mandela, and we aired it last year when she died, she said the reason our kids today in South Africa have she said we have high unemployment because those kids, when they were kids, were fighting against apartheid. So y'all got to decide right now, how much are you willing to fight for? And understand this. You're not just fighting for her and him to get educated. You're fighting for his kids' kids. Her kids' kids. And you better hope that her kids' kids will look back and say, I had a mama and a daddy and an aunt and an uncle and a church member and a fraternity brother or neighbor who dared to fight for me to have a better life. And so if you want to just keep talking, go right ahead. But we got enough groups here who need you to be in the fight with them. The question is, what are you prepared to do? Give it up for our panelists, our kids. Give it up for all of our groups, the 74, the School Choice is the Black Choice. If you have not signed up for those tables, go outside. They're there for you. Let's change the future for our kids. Y'all have a great night.